another video. First day of November. And you know what that means? It's time to talk about a band that could or could not be listenable. And that band is the one and only from the Netherlands, Gnaw Their Tongues. Now, if you don't know who and what Gnaw Their Tongues is, they are an experimental noise and black metal project based out of the Netherlands, all done by one person by the name of Maurice. And he has been running along with this project since 2005. And at the time that I am recording this, he is still currently active with this project. So I think it's about time we sit down and talk about one of the albums that he is well known for and gets all the buzz. That is All the Dread Magnificence of Perversity, that was released back in 2009. This was very interesting to say the least for me. Not only for its scary and raw production, but it is like the way that the music instrumentation that is being played in this very hypnotic fashion of that big boom sonic mass of anger, despair, that really makes this record in the fold very disturbing for its self-representation. Or I just say weird for that time being. So this album runs for about a total of 62 minutes and spans across 9 tracks ranging from 6 to 8 minutes long, which is quite the standard formula that every extensive black metal band goes for when it comes to experimentation with their sound and their creative musical engineering. So my thoughts on the songwriting, the drumming sounds like, it kind of sounds like a drum machine if you listen very closely to the snare. The drumming kind of reminds me of like, I'm listening to Swans, but they're like more building up, but they're black metal. The vocals sounds like Maurice was influenced by a lot of Gorgoroth, even with some of the words that he's using, like thy, and some Latin phrases thrown into the gate. Not to mention if any black metal band was copying one another. But it's very interesting to see that people that enjoy this style of music tend to seek further into something that creates that certain shock value to the audience, or to their audience perhaps. The sound tends to be expectingly harsh and evil if you look at it at first glance, but in the end I tend to have like a second thought and think to myself, I wasn't really expecting this from beginning to end. Beforehand, I was familiar with this project before until I heard some pieces of this record, which is why I'm doing this video. And how I came across Gnaw Their Tongues, I was in grade 12, so I was like going into college, so that was like about 3 years ago, perhaps. Now let's get into the tracks. So the opening track on here, very raging, it's very haunting, like with industrial soundscapes and evil guitar riffing and feedback, and with very haunting, powerful drums, with screams and wails, sound like people are just burning in Dante's Inferno. Sounds like you are inside of Pink Floyd's The Wall movie, but on Arrow. Good track. Also, the first track on here is called My Oversizes Wavaging. And also, I'm going to be butchering a lot of these song titles. And the next track, Verband on Verlich. It sounds very doomy. I don't know, like the song kind of seems to be shifting closer to more of that funeral doom music rather than that experimental horror sound that I was kind of really expecting. The biggest mid part is pretty much the snare drum. Screams are very subduing, and the distorted bass and synths tend to be kind of overpowered over the guitars in the mix in the second half of the song. I mean, it's okay. Now we get to one of my favorite tracks on the record, Broken Fingers Point Upward in Vain. It's very groovy. It's a mixture of like that slow funeral doom sound mixed with drone and that very slow and haunting black metal into the fold with experimental here and there. Samples coming and going, also the first track to come with samples in the middle half, like making that more spooky to the listener with that steady flow of bass, feedback guitars, and kind of distorted reverb noise. Drums sound like a gun going off in a church, and I'm definitely going to be putting this on next Halloween. I really like this track. Good. Next track, The Stench of Dead Horses on My Breath and the Vial of Extents on My Hands. This one's kind of meh, I guess. The vocals are at front and center with deaf industrial soundscapes and punishing foot-tapping guitars and bass, not to mention the noise and feedback sounds. Kind of sound like strings played in this very gloomy way, but I tend to kind of get bored in the middle half. The second part where the samples tend to take away that vibe. a little bit, and everything after that kind of just feels like stumbling along behind it. Even with the noise, just tends to be a little bit hard and rough around the ears a little bit. The sample at the end kind of felt midpoint and kind of a weak finish. So yeah, I mean, that was kind of middle of the road for me. We get to another track, which is also one of my favorites on here. Oh, God, I'm gonna butcher this. Lange Quinn Anais La Fin do Temps. I hear pianos in the beginning leg of the track, and followed by very dense drumming and guitar chords, ringed out, layered vocals, and the vocals kind of sound like Attila from Tormentor and Mayhem sometimes. The overall feel of the song kind of makes me wonder if I'm listening to Nort, that one funeral doom band from somewhere, with that slow build up, with even makes this track very unique. But other than that, no, I don't really have anything negative. I actually really like it. Even the reverb on this track makes the track just feels distant, and that very slow pace of the song works really good. Next track, Gazing at Me Through Tears of Urine. Very boring. The drumming on here kind of just sounds like a mixture of Swans and the one black metal band from the underground, Cargontudus, if they're like playing in the style of slow doom metal, but they are black metal at the very start. But the problem of this song that just ruined it for me was just the whisper section, and I'm not a big fan of whispering in black metal, and it just feels cringe. It just feels try hard. They just try to sound like Cradle of Filth. Very boring. Least favorite track of the record. I'm not a big fan of it. Don't worry, we get another track which is also a third of my favorites. Rife with Deep Teeth Marks. This is the longest track of the record, because like if you're not a big fan of high frequencies that are over like 5,000 hertz or so, better turn down the volume, because I took a audio course in audio engineering and production. I'm familiarized with it now. But don't worry, we get to the torture sound pretty quickly with that very groove sense. Like it's a groove of nightmare fuel with vocals and every instrumentation playing in rage and balls to the wall, to the point where everything feels like you are in purgatory in the final days of death row. Very scary, calm section with synth pianos and very mellow and dramatic guitars, as if you were walking alone on East Hastings Street, which I have, not at night but during the day. And then it just sounds like you're just suddenly captured and you're taken into a place where you just don't feel like you belong there. But overall, I don't really have a problem with this particular track at all. Very interesting. Title track. This is interesting because it starts off with a track with a girl screaming. And hey, now we get to one of the tracks that I actually heard, or I heard a snippet from. It was from a Farvan video. But yeah, it sounds very dark, very industrial, gloomy, very dramatic, very slow, and full of anger and despair and evilness and heaviness. Drum beats and fills everywhere. Very bassy and very drony. The guitars and vocals kind of give off that really nice sense of flavorful, harsh impact of torture, giving that flashback if you were listening to Abruptum. Samples also work perfectly in here, even midway before leading into that very uncanny second half. Pianos, strings, torture music at the max. Good track. Then we get to the closing track of the record. The Gnostic ritual conception of as abandonment of wounds teared in the soul. Sounds somewhat boring in the first half, because like everything just really kind of just tends to build up, build, with like the very with that very rumbling bass industrial chamber sound that they were just recorded like in an empty warehouse. It would have been funny if it was like recorded at a warp speed by just hitting a cymbal or a gong. It just sounds like you're like in a age where the black hole era that happens in about like 500 billion or 1 trillion years from now. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm just not in the mood or something, but it's okay. And that is the record. That was sure something, I will say. Overall, I really like this record, especially of how horrifyingly and also how densely heavy this record tends to be. But on some parts, the sound kind of makes me feel to want more, because some parts of Gnawther Tongues with some releases just tend to be dull and just left unfeathered in some shape of way and form. But I'm not hating on this record. Look, overall, I enjoyed it from front to back, and I will for sure go check out some more Reese's other projects, even with Gnawther Tongues, with their earlier stuff, even some of their newer stuff. But on the side note there, like I just kind of tend to like seek something a little bit heavier, because like before Gnawther Tongues, I was kind of like listening to stuff that was even heavier, like Utarm, Senthil, Warnplague, Merzbow, Rimla. Oh yeah, don't forget about Emit. But for a grade on this, I'm kind of feeling a 6 out of 10, but it's mostly like a 7 out of 10. And is Nether Tongues listenable? Well, yeah, I would say so. Yeah, they're listenable. Yeah, go check out the Nether Tongues. Get out of here. And yeah, that will do it for this video. Let me know your thoughts are in the comments. What are your thoughts on this video? Did you like it? Did you hate it? What bands should I review next? And yeah, cheers.